So we're here today to talk about innovation and how charters and traditional districts, what can we be doing together to produce better outcomes and better lives for the kids for the state of Texas. And I'm thrilled at the panel. I can't believe they all accepted. I'm so excited and honored that each of you are here today. So I'm going to do brief introductions of our panelists, and then we're going to sit for some conversations, and we'll punt at the end for Q&A. So please think of some good questions. I'm going to start by introducing Joe Sidlecki. Did I say that right? Yes. Worked on it for hours. He's the Associate Commissioner for Charters and Innovation at TEA. Previously worked for the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, which Yasmin, apparently you did as well. I don't know if y'all overlapped or not.
I did a study for them.
Oh, you did? Okay. Oh, and McKinsey too. There's that. And so, Joe, you've been at TEA since the beginning with Commissioner Morath. Is that right?
Shortly thereafter.
Shortly thereafter, yeah. And so we're just thrilled with his energy that he brings to the conversations, much like what we're doing now, again, as Commissioner for Charters and Innovation. He worked at the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, worked at the White House Office of Management and Budget, and Deloitte. We have several consultants on this panel. And degrees from UT, LBJ School, and of course Wharton, who doesn't? Not me. Yes, I will punt next. I will punt to Yasmin. Welcome. Thanks for driving down. Did you drive this morning? Last night. Thank you. Really good decision. Was a consultant at McKinsey and Company for several years. Also did a study for the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation. She's a member of the Charter 100, the International Women's Forum, SMU Tate Series Board of Directors. You guys have so many accolades. It's going to take the whole time to read just your intros. In 2011, she was named to Dallas Business Journal's 40 Under 40, undergrad degree in Finance and Business Honors from UT, and an MBA from Stanford. I need more letters after my name, other than MRS before my name. Jody, next. Thank you for being here, Jody. She's the Chief Innovation Officer at Beaumont ISD. I love that there is such a role. Kudos. We hear fabulous things. Excited to hear from you about what you guys are doing there. She also worked in petrochemical industry for 16 years, so long history in the business world prior to coming to the education field. So 18 years of experience in education as a teacher, a BBA from Lamar University, and an MED in Educational Administration from Sam Houston. So again, more letters that I don't have. And finally, Kent, thank you, Superintendent of Fort Worth ISD, doing some really innovative stuff in Fort Worth. And as such, TEA named you guys one of the top Texas urban districts in year-to-year positive growth. We love to see that trend. We'll talk more about that, of course. Many roles in education as a high school teacher, a guidance counselor in Philly, then became a principal and administrator before serving 17 years as superintendent in Phoenix, Arizona, and now Fort Worth. So you've been everywhere, man. BA in Latin American Studies from Carleton College in Minnesota, Master in Ed and Counseling Psychology from Temple in Philly, and then a PhD in Educational Leadership from Arizona State. So, I mean, wow. Thank you guys for being here. Really appreciate it. So, again, this conversation centers around some new innovative things that Texas has been doing, in large part to what we call 1882 partnerships. So the 1882 is really a bill. It was a Senate bill that was passed in 2017 that really encouraged traditional districts to look at innovative ways, not only to help improve academic outcomes, but to just broaden offerings to kids who may not be thriving in the district that they're in their zip-coded school. So I'm going to punt to you, Joe, first, if you wouldn't mind talking about some of the intent of legislation, and then the commissioner's vision and what you've seen in your course in this role so far at TEA.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate it. As I start every talk, I'm from TEA, and I'm here to help. So hopefully this
he really
helps you all understand 1882 a little bit more. But I'll start with just a history of charter school authorizing in Texas real briefly. Many folks don't realize that both the state and districts have always had the authority to authorize charter schools. And from 1995 to present, the state's authorized about 180 charter schools that now operate about 750 or little over 800 schools. Districts have always had the authority to authorize charter schools as well. although very few had actually ever taken advantage of that authority in the past. That changed in 2017 when the legislature passed Senate Bill 1882. And Senate Bill 1882, what it really did was provide incentives for districts to authorize charter schools or partner with existing charter schools. And those incentives were really two big incentives. One was financial. It really varies by district, but by and large, larger districts get about $1,000 extra per kid for the students that are in schools that are operated by partner organizations. There's also an accountability pause. Schools still get a rating, but the state must refrain from appointing a board of managers or ordering the closure of a school in the first 2 years of operation by a partner. So there's different types of partnerships. So the one that gets the most press and is most controversial is the turnaround partnerships, where a district brings in a partner to attempt to significantly improve or change the learning environment in a failing school. That's one type, but there's another type called innovation partnerships. And underneath that, there's really two. One is launching brand new schools, and we've seen that. And the other one is a partner organization working with a district at an existing school that's not an F-rated school. Who are the eligible entities for a partnership? There's 501c3s, which includes existing state-authorized charter schools or out-of-state charter schools, and also newly created 501c3s, institutes of higher education, and a third type is other governmental entities. And we've seen one of those because the city of San Antonio operates a pre-K program that partners with several districts. So what are the requirements at the high level for this partnership? First and foremost, the district actually has to authorize the partner as a charter school. There have been partnerships in the past around professional development, around leadership development, but those wouldn't qualify in this particular case because the law states that the district has to authorize the partner as a district charter school. The partner has to then operate the campus, which we've defined through rule, meaning that the partner is in charge of people, time, money, and academic program. There's different ways to structure that. It is a partnership after all, but in some instances, the staff can be staff of the partner organization, or they can be staff at the district. That's really for the partners and the districts to work out. And then finally, I'll say TEA approves the benefits for the partnership, so either the financial resources or the pause, not the partnership itself. And we've actually denied a couple of partnerships, and those partnerships continue to operate. They just operate without the financial incentive that the district could have earned if it would have met the bar that we had laid out in rule and that we think was the intent of the legislation. So that's the kind of high-level summary. What I would say is since 2017, there's been 18 districts to also authorize 32 organizations to operate 85 schools. Just to put that in context, that's in 2 years. Over 30 years, our state-authorized charter sector is at 800 schools. So there's been a big kind of incentive that districts have really taken advantage of over the last couple of years. And I will say there's more, but I'll kind of leave the TEA help at that level for now, and then chime in as
we appreciate your help. You guys really have been promoting this, and a lot of these are so successful, and we want to be learning about them. That's why we're all here today. Is there a waiting list? Like, do you have a queue of folks?
Well, so this year we got letters of intent from 31 districts saying that they're considering pursuing an 1882 partnership. Now, we do not think all of those will come to fruition. It's hard work, as Jody and Kent can attest on the district side, to actually put out a call, seek a partner, rigorously vet that partner, and then finally negotiate the contract between the partner and the organization. So we should probably see another 10 to 15 in this coming year. And the agency does a lot to try to support through grants and development of a new team to help districts actually kind of train their innovation officers, seek partners, and kind of develop these partnerships.
That's awesome. That's really exciting. Would you say they're geographically diverse, or
yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
We've got some out in West.
Even the ones that have MOUs or whatever.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, we've got there's partnerships already that exist in small towns in Roscoe ISD in West Texas. I think the whole school system has about 600 or 700 kids. To Fort Worth, which is one of the largest districts in the state, and everywhere in between.
That's really cool. Great. Okay, Yasmin. So this is so exciting because Yasmin and Uplift has a partnership with Grand Prairie ISD, but you guys did this all on your own. You didn't have any incentives. Tell us about how that happened and how it's operating now.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's so nice to be here with all of you today and to talk about one of the things I'm most proud of at Uplift, which is our partnership with Grand Prairie ISD. 5 years ago, the late Superintendent, Dr. Susan Hull, had a conversation with me about how she would love to bring IB programming into the district, and would I be willing to partner with her and do an innovative model. And so we went inside Lee Elementary in Grand Prairie ISD and opened Uplift Lee. So if you walked into Lee Elementary Primary School and went down the kindergarten hallway, you could go into an Uplift classroom or a Lee Elementary classroom. And so we have two principals, one over Lee Elementary, one over Uplift Lee. They collaborate on a daily basis. Teachers now, like, they can pop into each other's classrooms and learn from one another. So it shows what really authentic collaboration can look like inside one school building. We then opened this year, and I was so sorry that Susan could not have seen it, our middle school partnership. And this is, I haven't heard of any other model like this in the state, where the Grand Prairie ISD board trusted us to serve their students inside an Uplift-owned building. And so the rising sixth graders from Uplift Lee come over to Uplift Grand, just down the road in Grand Prairie, and they are our new sixth graders, and they will continue with us until they graduate. Susan and I felt like it was a much more affordable model to leverage all the IB staff and programming at Uplift Grand versus trying to replicate it in one of her middle schools. And so those sixth graders, we have about 50 of them, they are coded to GPISD, but they're mixed with Uplift Grand kiddos. I don't even think their teachers honestly know who's who, because when we take attendance, our attendance coordinator is coding them kind of on the back end. And so it's just a neat way to continue that partnership, again, being really innovative and thinking about how to leverage the resources and expertise of both institutions.
So your new middle school, these are kids that are matriculated, right? So they've grown in the IB program through elementary, and now are they intermixed with traditional? Are they in an IB path? Do they have separate curriculum?
Uplift schools are all IB authorized, and so, but they're mixed with our kids who went to Uplift Grand Primary School, and they're all together in classrooms, and they just think of each other as
typical classmates.
They're just classmates. And but on the back end, GPISD will get credit for Uplift Lee Middle School housed at Uplift Grand, and they get credit for enrollment, they get credit and the funding, obviously, and the test scores.
That's great. That's a really important part is the test scores. So Jody, I'm now going to punt to you. Am I saying this correctly, that you are one of only two that operates an out-of-state charter partnership?
We do. We have a out-of-state partnership. They're from Indiana. They were actually started in Boston, Massachusetts. They moved over to Indiana. They operate 15 or 16 schools in the IPS school district. We were able to go visit them and see their schools in action in Indianapolis. Really liked them as a in-district charter provider, began talking to them, started a negotiation process that took a couple of months, and now they're operating two of our schools. They operate one of our elementary schools, and they operate the middle school that elementary feeds into. And we really like the model that they've brought to the district, see a lot of improvement. I just sat down this past week with the principal at both of our elementary in-district charter schools, seeing significant reductions in discipline referrals, seeing improvement in student achievement that's beyond what we're able to do in the district yet. So I'm very hopeful that it's going to continue to be successful, and we're looking to partner with additional folks. We're bringing another out-of-state partner in.
You are? Well,
yes.
So speak perhaps, what was the model that attracted you to this particular partnership?
The one that's currently operating has a very strong RTI model. For those of you who are not in education, response to intervention, they They identify students who are significantly below grade level in performance, and then they provide the intervention services those kids need in order to close that gap and help them to perform on grade level, and then ultimately, we hope, beyond. But they also had a really strong social emotional component. They've established a mindfulness room at the school. They're very intent on teaching our kids self-management skills, self-awareness skills, to be able to understand where their frustrations come. It's a very depressed area, and our kids come from some pretty rough home life environments, and so they don't get a lot of support outside school. So this particular charter operator has a very strong model to provide that for kids, and we're really seeing it have a positive effect on students.
I love that. And then, am I correct? Do you also have a partnership with another charter with responsive ed? Is that?
Yes, we do. One of our elementaries is responsive ed. We really liked that model. It's a classical model. They bring in Latin, use core knowledge, which is a very strong liberal arts, history-based curriculum at the elementary level, a strong literacy-based program. So they're operating. Their results are actually extremely good. We had a really good conversation last Thursday, visited and walked the campus on Friday, and what I saw were kids engaged, teachers engaged, working with kids talking, kids learning. So it was really quite exciting. And one thing about this particular campus was, we had Imelda this year. We seem to have been really hard hit in our community with storms, but that campus sat with 6 inches of water post Imelda, and that neighborhood was just really pretty decimated. Yet they've seen an 85% reduction in discipline referrals. So kudos to them that even amidst that tragedy, they've been able to pick up the pieces for those kids and continue to educate them.
Well, and kudos to you for being willing to consider all different kinds of options for different kids. I mean, that's something we talk about a lot here at the foundation, is just clearly in education, you guys know this better than anybody. There is no, a perfect spot for anyone. So even in one district, to have multiple models is really exciting. And I think we're seeing that proliferating and love that. And speaking of unique models, Kent and Fort Worth, you're one of few to have partnered with an institution of higher ed, which I love. And it happens to be my husband's alma mater. Shout out, dad, whatever, you're that too. And Texas Wesleyan. And then I love the Como. Is that the elementary, the Hogwarts, the whole, that's so, I want to go. Talk to us about that. Why an institution of higher ed? And I'd also love to know what the importance was, perhaps, of getting buy-in, of having a familiar name such as Wesleyan as a partner with you.
Well, this was kind of a two-step process. So first, and I, for the first time today, bumped into and met Mike Miles, who was really the pioneer in this work, where we identified 5 campuses that had experienced persistent underperformance, community serving, generational poverty. And while in those communities we did have schools that were achieving well, these 5 in particular were really, really struggling. Years at a time, one for 6 years, one for 5 years. And so what we did was completely reconstitute those campuses, much like the ACE program that Mike started in Dallas. We replicated a good idea. So we invited all those teachers to reapply for their jobs. And many of them moved on to other schools across the district. We have 5,600 teachers and serve 143 campuses. Some of them moved on, some of them retired. And we identified local dollars in the general fund to incentivize our best teachers to come to the most difficult zip codes in these 5 campuses, a $10,000 stipend. So we were able to attract great instruction. Same thing with principals. Principals also received a stipend. And these schools in 1 year turned the corner. Today, 4 out of 5 of them, although the benchmark data we just got back last week, indicates that all 5 now are heading in the right direction. So that's a costly investment. It's about $1 million a campus. The Rainwater Foundation helped us with after-school programming because the model is high-quality teachers, but also what do students who are behind, who don't start the educational race in kindergarten at the educational starting line, what do they need? More time on task with high quality instruction. So we free breakfast, instruction, lunch, instruction. They don't go home at 3 o'clock. The school doesn't end until 4 o'clock with an extra hour of reading and mathematics embedded into the day. And then the after-school program also with athletics, with enrichment, with fine arts, and yes, with tutoring and reading and math. And then dinner at 5:45, and then those kids go home. That's an expensive model. And one of our board members said, how are we going to sustain this? And then 1882 came along. And we said, this is a great opportunity for us to bring in a partner, sustain the extra investment, because some kids require more investment than others because they're not starting the race at the same place, and they don't have the home life that others do. And it was an opportunity for us to identify an honorable partner in Texas Wesleyan, good win-win, because now they have a place to put their student teachers. We have a place for our teachers to get a master's with agreements. We have students wearing Texas Wesleyan gear, and they know where they're going to go to college. So it's a really kind of a pre-K to 16 partnership with a private university that has deep roots on the east side of Fort Worth.
I love that. I have so many questions. I'll stick to sort of the community part of it. And then I think each of us can weigh in here. We've heard and probably read of some of these endeavors that have been super successful, and then some of them who just can't quite make it over the finish line. Just there may not be the community support there. There may be resistance to the term charter and ideas in folks' head about what that is and what it isn't. So would you talk about? I was interested about the teacher portion. Some teachers, and I know Dallas did this, and I know San Antonio as well, sort of managing that transition and how you communicated with teachers, and maybe some things that if you had to do it over again, you would do differently.
Yeah, I mean, I would say teachers weren't the problem. Our best teachers who wanted adults respond to incentives, always have, always will. Talked about the free market conversation earlier. I'm creating an incentive for teachers who are achieving better outcomes to get paid more. I think we all agree with that. And this is a system that allows us to do that. So the problem was not with the internal community. The challenge, and ours wasn't a turnaround model. We turned the schools around. It was a continuation of that turnaround in order to sustain the investment. The challenge with these kind of partnerships, I think we're going to find that at the district school level, is to communicate with the external community, with our after-school program, because we think a lot about parents, teachers, students, but schools don't happen in a vacuum. There's this thing called a school community, the faith leaders in the neighborhood, the nonprofits, the after-school programs. We have to do a very, very good job of talking to them about the fact that having a district charter hybrid, in my view, is the best model that can exist, is the right thing to do, and that they will be full partners. What people, this kind of us versus them conversation, which I think is foolishness. The best model, in my view, is that hybrid model. If you look at district achievement nationally, it's pretty much a bell curve. There's a small number of excellent district schools, a small number of horrible district schools, and most of us are in the middle. The national data on charter is exactly the opposite. It's inverted. It's a U. There's lots of it's hard to find an average charter. They're either really, really good, most of them in the same zip codes as the really, really good district schools, or they're not. And I think where we have the ability to have the autonomy, the freedom within fences, the infrastructure of support that a district can add, and then the autonomy and the innovation and the quick decisions that the charters can implement, is really the best of both worlds. Our charter brothers and sisters have a great idea. They can implement it on Monday. I have a great idea. I can implement it in 18 months.
So when you were talking about flexibility in the classroom, kids coming earlier and leaving later, this particular partnership allows you that flexibility.
Absolutely. Again, it's about stable governance. In Fort Worth, we've turned the corner. We're entering the modern age with a board who really gets it and are supportive of these kinds of innovations. And I think it's stable governance at the macro level, but also stable governance at the micro level as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that board aspect is super important. Yasmin or Jody, I know at least I've heard you guys did just a really phenomenal job at generating generating buy-in from community leaders. How was your board? What was the role of the board in that process, and something that maybe you wish you would have done that you didn't, et cetera?
We're really fortunate to have a great board. We've had some changes to the
And
board.
we're obligated to say that publicly, right?
Well, we are. We are. But I will tell
Probably
you,
because y'all are all here. Like, you actually have
Is
some pretty
that-
good symbiosis there.
is that,
So
like, we actually really do have a great board. As a matter of fact, at the last board meeting when I presented the applications for the 2 new partners to begin our negotiations, one of the board members said, "Jody, I just don't hear you talking enough out in the community." Well, I've been traveling a lot here lately with TA obligations and then some personal travel for my daughter. But and I just said, sometimes when you say charter, people get, this is in a board meeting, and get kind of nervous. And she just said, "We're partnering. We're partnering. All we're doing is getting an entity that knows how to run a school, and we're paying them to run the school, and we're doing everything else." And I thought, that is absolutely what we're doing. And we really have sort of, when we presented it to the community from the very beginning, it has been that model. I do come from a business background, and I was quite familiar with the concept of contracting out work at the chemical plants, and that the refineries are prevalent where we live. And so when I came into this work, it was like, we're really just subcontracting. This really shouldn't be controversial, because we subcontract out special ed services, we contract out all kinds of services in the school district. And this is just another area that we're going to subcontract out. And the state's just making it much simpler for us to be able to do. So we just need to find the right contractors to come in and do the work. And so what started out as kind of we had some really underperforming schools. We had 3. We thought they were going to be closed. In order to keep them open, we elected to go the Senate Bill 1882 route and do the partnerships. It was really quickly into the process, though, that the light bulb went off, and there were these aha moments in our cabinet meetings where this is an opportunity to create a district that really meets the needs of kids. We can bring in different types of operational models into the district with a different emphasis on student aspirations, strengths, desires, needs. For instance, we're looking at maybe a fine arts academy somewhere down the road. We want to get an IB school in. So we realized that SGS in the state of Texas isn't just partnering, but it's creating a school district that meets the needs of students, and then providing parents the opportunity and students the opportunity to attend the school of their choice. So our expectation is within 3 to 5 years that parents with their children will choose what school they want to go to. And so we're building now great options, which is another part of the system of great schools. We're trying to really be mindful about what types of schools we bring into the district, and then advertise that very clearly to our community through it's a school performance framework, or it's a school report card, so that they can assess the school they want their kid to go. And then we want to make sure that it doesn't matter where you live, your zip code shouldn't restrict the school that you are allowed, or your child's allowed to go to. So it really is like ramping up equity across the board for those kids who've been underserved for, most of educational history in America. We're going to make sure, our goal is to make sure they have access to the same educational system that those of the most affluent of us have. And so it's a lofty goal, but I do think we're going to be able to do it. And I think that TA is going to make it happen.
he's here to help, remember?
So from a board, I would just say I think some of the headlines are intentionality and not getting your feelings hurt. So when we started having the idea about the partnership, Dr. Hull and I both took a subset of our board members to go see the Sky Partnership, which was Spring Branch, or is still Spring Branch, KIP, and yes, PrEP. It was the only other innovation partnership like that at the time. And so everyone could get a sense of, well, what does this look like that we are trying to bring to both of our organizations. And then we just had very formal communication plans of how to keep both of our boards in the loop all along the process. We brought our boards together at different points in time. My board understood they had to go to Grand Prairie because that's obviously where the district needed to have their meeting. And so I think that intentionality allowed our boards to be invested and take great pride in this. And then with respect to not getting your feelings hurt, I don't know of any large ISD board that doesn't have some anti-charter folks on it. Like, it just is what it is. And so I remember it was last spring, and Susan called me. It was literally before our joint board meeting to approve the middle school partnership. And she said, I am so sorry, Yasmin. Like, I'm so embarrassed. I have been trying for the past week or two, but I have 2 board members who are going to vote no on our partnership tonight, despite how successful the primary school has been. And it honestly even has nothing to do with Uplift. And she's like, I am just so worried that it's just going to be an embarrassing situation for your board. And I was like, Susan, my board, they're like big boys and big girls. They're going to be fine. I will call my board chair and give them the heads up. And no matter what is said about us, we are fine. And let them have their space to share whatever they want to share about us. We are good. And those 2 board members did vote no, but they actually did so in a very constructive way. And everyone was fine going into it. So I think it's okay to not have everybody on board. You just have to have a majority. That's all you need.
Just need one vote to win.
Stephanie, I want to try to connect a couple dots. So Jody had mentioned SGS, the System of Great Schools Network. That's a program that the agency has created to help districts do exactly what Jody had just laid out, and I think she's a perfect spokeswoman for it. I mean, the way she laid it out, we're really trying to help districts understand, like, what are those things that your families want, and then go try to provide them. And it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to be the provider yourself. You can seek partners to deliver that. And I think that's one key learning that we've learned over the first, we're about to launch our 4th year of SGS network support for districts. We've got about 18 districts in it right now.
But to be clear, you don't have to be one of these partnerships to partake. Is
No,
that right?
you don't. No, and we've
Maybe
got
just about 10,000-foot view of what SGS is, because it's super effective and he's here to help. This is an amazing.
Yeah, 10,000-foot view. We really say to districts, there's really kind of 4 or 5 things you really need to do if you're going to be an SGS district. One is set the right North Star goal: more kids in high quality, best fit schools. Stephanie, to your point, just an A or B rated school may not be good enough. Like, you have to find a type of school and program that works for your kid. One, set the right North Star goal. Second, kind of analyze your district and understand what your community wants. And that's the key thing I want to connect back to the boards, right? Reforms last if they have a constituency. If you create new schools that parents want, then that's the constituency that will fight to maintain this partnership or that partnership or this partnership. So we've really started to advise folks in that second bucket. Don't just look at where your neighborhoods are in need. Go ask your families what they want, or actually show them what's possible as a way to kind of like get them involved in the work. The third thing is, then once you know what that is, execute what Jody had described as expand great options. Go find partners, whether that's an internal educator team that has an entrepreneurial spirit that might not have ever thought of pursuing a charter, but you can actually help them pursue an in-district charter, or an external partner. The third thing is kind of increase access to options. So it's no good to have options if families can't access them. So we encourage broader school choice policies. Kind of one interesting note is last night, Midland opened their school choice portal, Apply Midland ISD. They had 700 parents apply the first night to transfer to different schools or to go to schools of choice. And there's always school choice. It's through the real estate market right now, right? Or it's through the kind of gray market of parents who know how to get into different schools. And one of the things in SGS you commit to is actually making it much easier for families to understand and access their choices. And Kent should be credited. They've got 40-some schools or programs of choice in the district right now. And it's really clear. They make it very kind of known to families that they have those options. And then the last thing is, and maybe it's really the first thing, is you create an innovation office. You dedicate somebody's job to thinking about these issues. What do parents want, and how do I deliver it every day? And that's Jody's one, and then Kent has a great innovation officer, David Sands, as well. And then the agency runs an innovation officer boot camp. So we help them understand, like, what are those 4 things I just laid out? How do we actually actualize those, both kind of through a system, outside into the community, and actually, sometimes managing up to their boards and superintendents.
Okay, so speaking of incentives, do you get incentives to participate in System of Great Schools?
Not in system of great schools. That's a lot of in-kind services. So we basically assign experienced, what we call executive advisors, folks like Duncan Klusman, who had actually kind of been one of the founders of the first partnerships, former Spring Branch ISD superintendent. He has been advising Jody and Superintendent Allen in Beaumont. So you get a lot of in-kind services, but then once you develop your plans, the agency, we use our federal school improvement money in a very different way, different than any other state. We allow districts to use it to launch new schools or to kind of finance partnerships. So that's separate from SGS, but the reality is like districts that are in SGS are better positioned or have been better positioned to win some of those grants. So then there's a lot of resources at the campus level for districts that we're providing, not only the incentive of 1882, but you can get, up to $1 to $2 million to launch a new school. And then you get the $1882 ongoing through the duration of the contract. So there's a lot of incentives and a lot of support to try to help districts actualize some of these new innovative ideas.
That's awesome. And just to clarify, to participate in System of Great Schools is totally voluntary, as are all these partnerships, correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
No, the commissioner would not want to force anybody down this path.
No,
It's all for
no.
folks who want to do this work.
That's right. That's right. So let's talk a bit about incentives. We know they can be controversial. Teacher pay is a merit pay. The ACE program can be controversial. I know we had a very big discussion about that last legislative session. And talk about the role that incentives played. And Ken, I think you mentioned yours a little bit. Maybe just talk about how important that was to you guys.
Yeah, and with 143 schools and 5,600 teachers, we're just talking about a small group of them. So if we're serious about district transformation, we need to implement a performance management system. Again, much like what's done with our neighbors to the east in Dallas, where teacher raises are based on student achievement and student growth. Both a formula that's fair, because not every kid is starting the educational race at the educational starting line, and for some of our more Tony zip codes with higher socioeconomic and families and support, it's harder to achieve the growth in those communities. But we want to maintain that high achievement. So I think that is a controversial thing sometimes with our teachers unions.
Well, the argument is that it's exclusively based on test scores, which we've seen that not to be effective.
It's
right?
absolutely not the case, and if you do it intelligently, there are many other aspects. But
right.
back to the original point about is there an incentive? I think there is. Success breeds success. And when you're doing these kind of innovative things, our philanthropic partners in Fort Worth are pound for pound as strong as any other city I've ever been in, and really are engaged and invested in our success. So when you're doing things internally, the external support comes, and really to the point earlier about choice, we have 40 some programs and schools of choice. That's what our parents want, and we want to eliminate waiting lists. We're going through a boundary and reallocation, shutting some schools down, moving students from here to there to create space so that we can replicate some of these great options and have more than one Texas Academy of Biomedical Sciences, one of the top high schools in the state. Why shouldn't we have more great options than fewer? So excellence, equity, efficiency, and choice, to me, are the values of public education.
I love all that. Yasmin, I know to Kent's point, success breeds success. You've been in operation the longest on this stage. So talk about, have you seen, whether there was resistance at the beginning, the progression of that, and does that mean you're growing and even more partnerships and opportunities because folks are buying in more so now?
Sure. So one of our big lessons learned was fail fast and recover quickly. So in our first year, both Dr. Hull and I got the paired superintendents wrong. It's like an arranged marriage. You're creating a superintendent, and just that chemistry was off. And so at the end of the school year, we both swapped. And it was radically different. And we also moved from teachers at Lee Elementary in the district asking Uplift teachers, so when you leave it, like, how long are you staying here? And we were like, maybe forever. We don't know. And so you just have to get over those initial humps. Like I tell everyone, this work is so messy. You have to go in knowing it's messy and complicated and have that resiliency that you're going to just fight through it and be committed. And so then the scores came out in year 2, because in year one, we only had kindergarten through second grade, and the third graders did really well. And then what we saw in the next year was that Lee Elementary scores were getting better as Uplift Lee continued to be one of the highest performing primary schools in our network. And so I think there is something to be said of not only the partners part of the school doing well, but actually both sides doing well and getting better. And so that has allowed us to continue to expand inside Grand Prairie ISD. We are pretty selective we have like such a best in class partner in Grand Prairie ISD that it's a little hard to think about who would we do this work next, having just have had this first experience with us. So Uplift's not running around trying to honestly find another partner
insight?
right now, but we are really grateful to continue expanding our work inside the district.
That's awesome. Did I lose my mic? So speaking of messy work, Jody, you're as the role of Chief Innovation Officer. Talk about how did you get your hands dirty? Like what is some of the day to day? How much time were you at the executive level or even in the classrooms and with the teachers? Talk a little bit about getting dirty.
Well, this is really hard work.
Yeah.
I mean, I've presented a really ideal, overview of where we're headed, but the day-to-day is really, really hard. We have two different entities operating 3 schools. That's where we've started. We're bringing in 2 more partners now. We're in the process of negotiating. One of our partners retained the teachers as their employees. The other partner, they're our employees. We pay their payroll in the district. They manage them. That's been a really hard transition for our people. And I hate to get into SGS, and I didn't mean to open that can of worms. But
It was on my list. That was on my list of
good.
questions.
Okay, fantastic. So on the SGS side, one of the things that we're supposed to be doing and need to do is make the district level processes responsive to campuses, so they're not waiting forever for an answer or a solution. Like you'd said, it takes us 18 months to do what a partner can do in a week, and we need to make sure that doesn't happen. So it's been a very difficult process getting the district level departments to respond to the partners in a timely manner. So that's been probably the hardest part of my job. I do feel like sometimes I'm just like office hopping,
Like
you need to get that, you need to get that, you need to get that. And then going to the campuses, helping the teachers who are, quote, our employees who stayed on at those campuses, helping them to understand that you don't answer to us. You answer to our partner in the terms of you're going to have to implement their program. Because if the partner's asking them to do something that they're not accustomed to doing, I found they'd pick up a phone and call, or they'd email and say, Jody, la 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 la, and I'd say, go talk to your principal. Go talk to their superintendent. I can't intervene in that. So that separation of roles and responsibilities and kind of alleviating the internal conflict that occurs as change happens has been probably the hardest, messiest part. And it just takes a lot of patience and finesse. It takes a lot of conversation. Got to spend time in people's offices. Just really kind of comforting a lot of them just through the change. And it's going to be okay. This is just a problem to be solved. It's not the end of the world. This is really not nearly as big a deal as you think it is. We're going to fix, kind of thing. So that's really been the hardest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're laughing, Yasmin. Longevity, there's a huge part in that.
Well, I'm just laughing because I think one of our learnings was everyone thinks that the communication is like board and teachers and the principals. And what we found is that the folks who can cause the most unrest in these partnerships are like way, way junior down in the district and central offices because they might just not be getting that cascade of communication. So they're like, who are these Uplift people over at Lee Elementary? They're at the bottom of my list. Yeah. And so I think we learned like how deep communication has to go. And the other thing is the Grand Prairie team would turn kind of a blind eye if I deployed my IT team in to go help the Uplift Lee folks just because we were struggling to get something done. And, so you kind of work together to figure it out.
Yeah, I think one of the key things that when we talk to districts, then the agency supports districts and their innovation officers is helping to understand the difference between being an operator of schools, which districts have traditionally been, right? They direct run a bunch of schools, to an authorizer of schools as well, which means we're actually finding partners to run certain schools. It's a very different perspective at the district level, and where we see, right, a lot of the messiness is at that middle management level, where there may be a superintendent or even board or an innovation officer who says, yeah, we're doing both roles here. We're operating schools and authorizing schools. And it's hard for folks who've made their career, I'm going to overgeneralize here, telling schools what to do, to actually kind of give their partners the freedom to run the schools, or at least the parts of the schools, the way that they've actually signed a contract to do so. So there's no easy solution. It's just a lot of hard work, and that's a lot of what the innovation officers do. Is kind of fight those battles every day inside the district to try to help it be a slightly different type of organization.
And I've really found, just to interject, I think that the key to make this successful is just relationships. It's just spending time together, listening to your partner, responding when they have a need and getting it taken care of. But it's really just good relationship building and a lot of communication. Is what I found to be really important.
Yeah. I want to touch on one more real important issue, Joe. A lot of consternation we hear is from our rural friends who may not have as many options as some of you guys do. Can you talk about rural opportunities, maybe some successful rural partnerships that you've seen, and even rural innovation zones?
Yeah, I'll say there's two that come to mind. One is, so this law, I think, has had some unintended consequences in a good way. In Roscoe, I'd mentioned, a lot of folks have probably heard of Roscoe Collegiate School District. It's done incredible things. And the superintendent had spent many years having districts come visit him and then not be able to implement his program somewhere else. So we actually left the district, started a 501c3 charter school, and now he's partnering with 3 districts, and will likely be a 4th and a 5th this year, where the districts have hired him to actually come implement the program he designed at Roscoe when he was the superintendent there, but to come implement it as a partner. I think that's one really interesting way to scale. There's something that seems to work there. How do we codify it? So he went through a program that the state has to codify your model and then turn it into a nonprofit, and now he's partnered with a bunch of districts. That's one. Another interesting one is in South Texas. There's something called the Rural School Innovation Zone that came out of one of our grant programs, which is 3 districts partnering together. They asked their community what types of programs they want, and they realized as small rural communities, they couldn't deliver every type of program to their kids. So now it's basically school choice across 3 districts, and there's 4 different academic programs in addition to the comprehensive high schools that the kids can have access to. It's called the Rural School Innovation Zone. Technically, those programs within those high schools are charter schools, and kids from any of those 3 districts can access them. So, this isn't just necessarily for big urban districts,
Sure.
and that's what you hear about. But there's things that we're doing and that entrepreneurs out in the field are doing, and this is largely on the credit of a couple of superintendents who had some real visionary ideas, and this actually gave them the incentive and the support structure to actually turn those ideas into reality.
Yeah, it's allowing innovators to actually thrive. I love that. And they solved, do they do transportation amongst the Rural Innovation Zone? Do they?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Yep.
So
There's cross-district
Just
transportation.
take the bureaucracy hat off, and we can you guys can find solutions like you've already done. That's amazing. Okay. Yes, please.
Just a quick, and that's an important point, and I think one of the advantages of district charter hybrids, because choice without transportation
Right.
is not choice. If I am a family living in abject poverty, it's hard for me to get my kid on the other side of town.
Yep.
It's a different parent who can do that. So I think to the extent to which we can talk about these as taking the best of both worlds, I think we can really cover a lot of ground.
Then I will take, it's Q&A time, and so I'm going to be really selfish here and take the first question because I love what you just said. I can't remember, in House Bill 3, we upped the transportation allotment, right? I think we did. Because that's such a huge problem, Kent. So how did y'all, how do you have inter-district
We
transportation?
do, and I think HB3 just kind of accounts for it differently, transportation, but that's a whole different conversation.
I know, sorry, I
So,
did not mean to
so we're
close that
probably
can.
not the best example because, as I said, we turned around these 5 campuses and then brought in Texas Wesleyan to continue. Now, moving forward, we're talking to several partners to expand choice district charter hybrids in Fort Worth, and yes, from our perspective, we would be continuing to provide transportation because that's an important thing. The other piece too is to really show the world, because a lot of the board members you mentioned who are anti-charter make the apples and oranges comparison, say, but they're not a neighborhood school. You know, the kids who are naughty somehow come back to the district school in October, or they don't have the special education services. And what we're trying to demonstrate is we can do all of those
Right.
things, because we need to educate tall kids, short kids, left-handed kids, right? All kids.
That's right.
89% of the kids in Fort Worth ISD go to Fort Worth ISD. So we're going to be there. What we want to do is bring in charter partners to expand that reach and increase effectiveness.
Yeah, you do amazing work. So yes, we'll turn it over to Q&A. So I'll give you guys, I'll call on you and pitch to whomever. Emily has the microphone, so she'll run the microphone to you, and I will take our executive director, Kevin Roberts, and put the headmaster hat on and say, please make sure that your question is actually a question rather than a statement. So I think over here, this gentleman had his hand up first.
Couple of questions. First of all, I live in Midland, so the second question relates to the institution of charter schools in Midland. But the first one is, and I would assume this to be true, that you contend that charter schools do a better job than public schools. And if so, my question is why? What are the components that make that happen? And then secondly, I think my wife was reading to me on Facebook that someone was contending in Midland that the institution of charter schools by our public school system is simply the first step in a process of replacing our public schools with charter schools. I'd like your comments on that.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Did you want to go for it? You want to
Yeah,
answer
yeah.
first?
So I'll start with the fact that charter schools are public schools.
Thank you.
I think is kind of the most important kind of point to make there. And also say, I think all sectors of schools have a performance curve, right? There are great district schools and there are middling district schools and terrible district schools. The same goes for charters. The same goes for Catholic schools or parochial schools. And I think one of the kind of key things that we're trying to drive for is like find those that are on the right-hand side of that tail, the good side, and expand them and be less concerned with the governance type of the school. So that's kind of one perspective. So, you know, I don't know if that's going to answer all of the questions, but I'd say like that's kind of where I'm coming from. I don't want to speak for the state per se.
From a state perspective, I was a superintendent in Arizona for 13 years, where the charter movement was more about quantity than quality. I would say that Texas is doing a much better job in terms of ensuring that we're only partnering with high-performing charters, because some of the charters who are coming to save us have lower reading scores than we do. So we only want to partner with, I'm a fan of good charters. I'm not a fan of charters that are not good for parents and families, and I don't think anybody up here is.
Excellent point. Thank you. Emily, right behind you.
Hi there. This question is specifically for Joe. Hi there. I'm curious about the public school districts across Texas that are creating nonprofits within their own district from existing administrators in their district and hiring them as administrators of a nonprofit, paying them higher salaries with the extra money that they're receiving from the state, and the schools and the provision for the students may or may not be that much different than what they were getting before. How are you controlling that? How are we allowing that? In some cases, they're receiving waivers to provide this for more students than should be according to the law. So if you could speak to that, I'm concerned about the funding and where that's going to head down the road.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting question. I mentioned earlier kind of one of the unintended consequences. I mean, I think initially when the bill was authored and when it first started to go through the legislature, it was very specific to partnerships between districts and established charter school operators. At the kind of near the end, there was a second provision, we call it A2 in the law, that was added for these other entities. And at first, I think there's a lot of trepidation, and there still is. There's a lot that we could do differently, and I'll talk about that in a second. But what I think we've seen is that actually there's a latent pool of entrepreneurial leaders in districts that have actually never had an avenue to kind of articulate what their academic program might be and the freedom to go implement it. And I think one of the things that this bill did was allow for that. So we've seen over the last couple of years 12 newly created nonprofit organizations kind of come into the space, and many of those were birthed out of districts. There are some that I think are actually really, really interesting models that have a well-articulated vision for what schooling looks like, and they're really clear with the leaders about how they can actually operationalize that and why they need the freedoms from a lot of the district regulations to do so that come with being a charter school. On the flip side, there's actually some that may not have as clearly codified models. So one of the things that we're currently in the midst of doing, so I can't really comment on too much, is we're rewriting some of the 1882 rules to raise the bar, in particular on partnerships related to turnaround schools and partnerships related to newly created nonprofits to ensure a level of independence, a level of coherence in the academic model, and the requisite staff necessary to actually implement that model. So those are things that are in process, but it's one of the things that we've noted as well. But I think overall, it creates a space for, it taps that pool of latent leaders who aren't going to go create something from scratch like the founders of Uplift did. There's a whole pool of leaders who could actually do things differently if they're given the freedom, and this kind of allows them to do that.
Yes, ma'am. Emily, how about right here and then behind you? Next. Yeah.
This is for Kent. I understood you to say you have 40 different programs that parents can choose from. How do you help the parents know about all that? And how do you help match what's appropriate for that child?
We will have what's called a Choices Expo. So once a year in our large gymnasium, parents and actually buses from some of our parochial elementary schools come and look at Young Men's Leadership Program, single gender schools, Young Women's Leadership Academy, World Languages Institute, Texas Academy of Biomedical Sciences, many programs, the CTE programs and International Baccalaureate programs. So we do a very comprehensive, our communications department does a very comprehensive job of pushing that information out to our school community, a choices catalog that's really quite good. But again, one of the biggest challenges is our highest performing schools have waiting lists. So what we're trying to do is replicate those good options. We have 209 square miles in Fort Worth ISD, and with transportation issues and early college high schools, we want to put those, replicate great options, and put each one of those in every sector of the city. It's marketing really within the district and snuffing out those programs that are not good. Because the other piece too is just because it's a choice program, it needs to be a choice program that actually is performing well. So it's what are we going to start doing, what are we going to keep doing, and what are we going to stop doing? That's one of the biggest challenges I think in districts.
How do you find the one that's appropriate for that student?
Sure. Well, I think that's a parent conversation, obviously, and again, one of the biggest challenges is those parents who have the social capital and the knowledge and the ability to go find that out. They do. We need. I think all society needs to do a better job of really identifying those low-income, language minority communities that have seen generational poverty and really communicate with them. In Texas and North Texas, in all, the entire state, we have all these smart people moving to Texas, and I tell folks, we can import talent, but we can't export poverty. And every one of these large urban sectors has a growing population of students. Fort Worth ISD is 85% free and reduced lunch. And I've been in public education for 30 years. I know one thing for sure about public education, and that's kids, they grow up to be adults. So what kind of adults do you want in the state of Texas? Over half of the students in Texas live in poverty. 2/3 of the students in Texas, 66% of 5.4 million kids are students of color. That is our adult population in the decades to come. We need to look at our kids, urban kids in particular, not as problems to be solved, but as assets to be invested in with these kind of innovative solutions.
Hi, I'm from Midland also, and I actually have 2 children that are enrolled in a school of choice, and so I'm a believer in the methods and I'm a believer in the system. But one of the questions that I'm hearing a lot, and I have some questions about it myself, when we bring in private entities to run something and we're providing taxpayer funding and it's still a public school system, how are we handling and making sure that there's transparency in the use of those taxpayer dollars, and especially when we get into situations where these schools have their own separate board that's not an elected body, it's an appointed board or a selected board. So how are we as a state moving forward with a plan for that sort of accountability for taxpayer funding for these programs?
All right, so I am the state today, so I will answer that. So first I'd say, and this is more just of a provocative question for the crowd, is public education a particular set of institutions or is it an idea, right? I would argue that's actually an idea, and it can be delivered in different ways, whether that's through a traditional government system or a system of nonprofit schools. So that's kind of just at the high level. I would say in terms of kind of how the state ensures, so one, the districts are authorizing these partnerships, and one of the things that the state's trying to do is train these districts to be good authorizers, right? One of those things, and one of the things that's required in rule, is that the partners get an independent audit done that is the same level of rigor that a district gets every year, and the same that an independent charter school authorized by the state gets. So that's not to say that kind of cures all, but the idea is like that is kind of a level of transparency. There are requirements that the boards of these nonprofit-run schools and districts actually post their board, post their minutes, and are actually very transparent and accept any public member to their meetings. So those aren't necessarily going to catch every potential problem, but there is definitely efforts to, in the law, in the rule, and in the way that the agency monitors and tries to support districts to monitor the schools that they've authorized, to kind of have that same level of transparency, because that doesn't benefit anybody for these things to be mysterious or opaque.
Ma'am. For you all, and for all of us, we're HISD. And
I'm not the state today.
I resign.
What is the problem in the legislating of more charter schools? Why does it seem to be such a pull? So difficult to get more charter schools passed.
To authorize more charter schools in the state?
To authorize, yes. Thank you.
Well, I think, so the other side, so what we've talked a lot about today is some of the side of my work that I oversee, which is district charter partnerships and innovation. The other office I oversee is the state charter authorizing office. And we open an application every year. We get a number of applicants, and we actually run it through an incredibly rigorous process. In fact, and maybe this might not make some folks in the room happy, according to the National Association of Charter School Authorizers, we're the most rigorous authorizer in terms of the percentage of charter schools that get approved or recommended by the commissioner to the State Board of Ed. But I'd say every year we get around 20 to 30 applicants, and we advance 5 or 6 to the State Board of Education, and they ultimately have veto authority or not over it. And we've been adding a small number of charter schools each year, and actually helping existing charter schools that have a track record of success expand. So I'd say can be controversial, but the process continues on, and we'll hold a high bar from the state level about the partners that we want running schools in the state. It's a privilege, not a right, to run schools. But I'd say there is always controversy because things are slightly different, but we're doing our part to continue to let great operators with great ideas run more schools, and to kind of to Ken's point, kind of take care of those folks at the bottom who aren't doing right by kids.
I'm from Houston, and I've worked in education. I've recently become a supporter of one of Hillsdale College's charter school initiatives through their Barney schools, which will be Heritage Classical School is turning in its application on the 31st. They do have that is a proven track record, the model they're using. I have met the board members and the people, and I was extremely impressed, to the extent that I said, as a specialist myself who's lectured nationally, I would come and volunteer my services for free. When they said that, what you just said, that 30 or 40 are applied, 5 are chosen in the spring, from which maybe 2, 3 will be approved, I wanted to know ways that we could help. One of the things, we were at TPPF last year, and I was so inspired by the panel discussion on schools that have done exceedingly well, San Antonio ISD as a district and some things down on the border. And I picked up the position paper which explained how Texas has some very, very burdensome requirements. TPPF was very critical of your process. Some of the things, like if there's one mistake in the application, because the way the application is done, it's not, you can go, it won't advance to the next page if you've left something out, and they've lost all that time and effort. I was excited because I said, great, what are you going to do about this? And they said, it's not on our agenda. Are you aware of that, of the TPPF position paper, of what they saw as flaws in the process?
Certainly, I'm aware, and we revised the application this year, and we'll revise it next year.
Good. I'm so
based
glad to
upon
hear
comment. Can't say we're ever going to make anyone happy, and if we did, if everyone was happy with what we're doing, then we're probably not doing it
I don't want
right.
everyone to be happy,
But,
just
you know,
quality.
We've constantly kind of.
Just quality. I don't want crappy charter schools either.
I don't think any of us
but
do.
the high quality ones, it's hard for me to believe there are only 2 or 3. I would like to think there were more.
Thank you.
I do want to kind of clarify one misconception, and this could change with elections. State Board of Ed has only vetoed over the last 5 years one charter school applicant. So that said, in the years 6 and 7, there were several others. But the point is, it's not as, once they're recommended to the State Board of Ed, they've been getting approved. Now, that could change. The votes have been getting closer. But that is their kind of authority under law, is to kind of evaluate and make those decisions.
We'll do this last question. Thanks.
Thank you. My name's Mariana. I work for the Foundation for Economic Education, and I just want to commend all of you for what you are doing. And we actually have been watching the state of Texas. So I currently live in Georgia, and I have 2 kids. And because of the choice that we had to do online schooling and dual enrollment programs, basically the importance of having choice to me is so key, and I'm so glad we're talking about quality, not quantity. But my question to you guys is, I really focus more on long term. So it's almost a top-down and bottom-up approach. So right now what you're doing is so crucial, and at the same time, what are you guys doing to make sure that what is actually being taught in the schools is very pro-free market, pro-entrepreneurship, pro-personal responsibility?
Well, the State Board of Ed makes determinations about the standards and curriculum, so it's really not a question I think I can answer. I mean, I don't know if Kent, I'll
Yeah, I mean,
put you on the spot.
as a recent arrival here in Texas, and I wish I'd done it 10 years ago. You know, we have bumper stickers that say, I got here as fast as I could. This is a community, I can only speak for Fort Worth, but they really get the connection between education and the economy. We've got a tremendous mayor, tremendous business community, faith leaders, nonprofits who really understand that education is an investment. And I think the more we continue that conversation here in Texas, it'll continue nationally. To your point, absolutely, large districts need to offer significant choice for excellence for those students who are high achievers, for equity for those students who don't have the infrastructure that your kids do. Choice and also efficiency. We want to make sure that we are good stewards of the public resource. So, from my perspective, you're come to Texas. That's what you need. Yeah, come on back.
I might just add one thing there. So one of the things I really appreciated about House Bill 3 is some outcomes-based funding at the high school level, and with a lot of broad freedom on how that can be used. Uplift's had a very robust Road to College program that includes alumni support to make sure kids are actually completing college, not just going in, and we had to fund all of that philanthropically. So now that allows us to deploy some state dollars as well. And then one of the things that we found recently from interviewing our alumni is that even for our kids who graduate, they don't always go into a job that required college. And so we've now expanded our alumni support to include career guidance for our alums in college to help make sure they match to a job that actually required a college degree. So that's kind of how we're connecting to that free markets piece.
That's amazing. I want to talk to you about that. And I think you guys were talking about a partnership too, as we kind of see the great things we get done in an hour. Guys, thank y'all so much for being here today. Hope you'll stick around for the rest of the conference. Have a great day.
There you go.